The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus and his disciples set out for the villages of Caesarea Philippi. Along the way, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" They said in reply, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others one of the prophets." And he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter said to him in reply, "You are the Christ." Then he warned them not to tell anyone about him. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed and rise after 3 days. He spoke this openly. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. At this he turned around and, looking at his disciples, rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do." The Gospel of the Lord. St. Mother Teresa was fond of saying, God has called us to be faithful, not successful. Faithful, not successful. I think of that in our gospel because our human tendency is to want to see results. Like, show me the money, right? I want to see that this thing is working. And I think Peter probably had a little bit of that. In fact, I bet a lot of the disciples who were waiting the Messiah were like, we want some earthly results, like earthly kingdom, man. Come on, bring it. Destroy the Romans. Raise up Israel. They were wanting that. And so when Jesus is like, hey, the Son of Man must suffer greatly, be killed by the scribes and the Pharisees and be raised up, Peter's like, wait, it's not part of the plan, right? That's not success in the world's eyes. So that's why our Lord, rebukes Peter. And then he says, you're thinking not as God does, but as human beings do. Human beings want results. We want to see it now. And I get it. That's part of the desire. But God's not afraid of failure. He's not afraid to use failure as a means of success, whether we see it in this life or not. So, you think even Noah, we're reading about in the first reading, God, he washed his hands of creation. He's like, man, all I see on this earth is so much evil. I'm just going to flood it out and start new, right? He failed, seemingly. Okay, we see it again in Moses later on down the line. Moses goes up Mount Sinai after they just had this theophany. God had spoke to all the people, and they become depraved. And God says, I'm done with this. We're going to start fresh. Moses intercedes. So God's not afraid to kind of work with failure because he's playing the long game. Like he's got the big picture in mind. God has an eternal perspective. Okay, we're temporal, we're human beings. It's finite. Show me the results now. Okay? But God's thinking bigger, broader. He's thinking long-term, eternity. And so he can see through Jesus, can see through death, failure on the cross, to success of the resurrection, the new kingdom. Okay, so that's what God is teaching us, I think. And we got to recognize that tendency in us now that we're like, oh man, I'm so discouraged because the church seems to be sinking. Not so. Okay, even if there is failure and scandal and suffering and all that, God's using it to bring about a greater good. That's the message of the cross. So we don't want to fall into discouragement. Maybe we never see the results of our good labor. Maybe we're martyred or we just die of failure. God brings success out of that. That's the mystery. So our call, like Mother Teresa said, to be faithful, to follow Christ. Not worry about the results. Keep our eyes fixed on him, follow Christ. Okay, he'll lead us through death to life, through failure to success.